To be entangled, weary, and confused, it is not necessary to actually be interested in whatever the mind's involved with. Just pretend to be. Just drift along with it. The mind doesn't actually ask for much, just your full, undivided lack of attention. The more he realized what was going on, the more appalled and terrified one man said he was. That and fascinated. A man asked himself, is there a difference between being conscious in the moment and perfect stillness and silence? And if not, what should I learn from that I don't already know and which has got to be obvious as hell? A man named Hal heard noises in his basement, then noises in his attic, then noises in other rooms in the house, then noises in the plumbing and wiring systems, till he finally said to himself, damn, this is a noisy place, and went back to sleep in the dark in his cell along with all the other members of the Hal Symphony Orchestra, Ballet and Fidget Company, and Complainers Society. Good night, Maestro Zorkin. Good night, Hal. Good night, Ms. Nichols. Good night, Hal. Good night, Mr. Carlyle. Good night, Hal. Good night, Madam Polly. Good night, Hal. Good night, Frank. Good night, Hal. And on it so went, far, far into the night. Not a morality play. A man who believed he had a grudge against a certain mystic could never see any sign that the mystic either realized this, or if he did not return the ill will, and finally said to him, you never think about me, do you? And the wired one replied, I try not to think about anyone. I could have made this story much longer and considerably more complex, but this bare bones version fleshes it out adequately for the alert. A man had a horse that would not only run when he rode it, but even when alone and unmounted, would endlessly gallop in place. The power of the mind is also its weakness. Telecommunications. Everyone has two phone lines which can receive incoming calls, although very few are aware of the second one. I say, what do you call those who are aware? Well, I'm not sure what to call them, but what I am sure of is that those who know both lines are disinclined to take your call. No. One man discovered a cure for recording devices. A mystic told a man. A mystic told a man, if you can't stay home, there's no use in trying this. And the man asked the mystic, how long must I stay home? And the mystic answered the man, if you have to ask, you shouldn't even try this. And the man was distinctly perplexed, and the mystic said, see, I told you. Follow-up note. Even though you must be able to stay home to ever see this through, it is yet possible, while home, to remain too close to that other party there. You. One man discovered that the cure for echoes is not to yell first. Talking aloud to his horse, a man mused. Perhaps the trick is to see the mind as a hobby rather than a necessity. The horse offered no opinion. One man discovered that the cure for getting shot in the ass is to stick yourself in the eye. You can analyze man or analyze his mind. Same as you can critique a baby or else find fault with what's in his diapers. One man discovered that the cure for noise is more noise. And no, there is no cure for silence, since none is needed. One man titled one part of his life story, "The Geese Took Over the Asylum." Understanding is measured in tolerance and ultimately by indifference. The prime glue and attraction agent of the mind is in you believing that you're interested in and care what it thinks. As long as you continue to passively fall for this, you're done for, a goner, a walking dead man. Follow-up note. The way you prove your adhesion to its antics is by your lack of awareness of same. The mind provides the only addiction possible for a man, of which he is never conscious. One man stayed constantly upset over what seemed to be constantly spilled milk, only to eventually realize that it was white carpet on the floor giving the appearance. No matter where you look, if you're the looking kind, there's always something to see. Question: why are mystics never accompanied by guide dogs or hearing aids? A dead man's got to do what a dead man is capable of doing. Now, make that train to do. After losing a leg and being fitted with an artificial limb, a man continually visited upon his physician a multitude of complaints. It doesn't bend normally. I can't put as much weight on it as my real leg. It doesn't actually feel like I have a leg there, and so on. And finally the doctor said to him, "Listen to me. This is not a real leg. It's artificial, a man-made replacement, a substitute for the real thing. Now get over it. No matter what we do, it will never feel the same to you as a real leg." And apparently the man finally realized and accepted the unsettling situation, and thought, in fact, how fortunate it was that it occurred below the neck. Scant knowledge of human anatomy can be a comforting thing. Well, at least non-confrontational and curiosity-provoking. One man decided that it would be beneficial to always be mentally straightforward, and then concluded that the way to achieve this would be, curiously enough, not to think about things. One man could think in different places in his mind. Well, he said that he could. Is there a reason that you emphasize the word said? One man continued to shoot arrows into a bag of mush. It certainly provided him with something to do, and surely seemed to use up arrows, but little affected was the bag. One reason men enjoy dreaming of an afterlife is that there, they imagine, is a place where they might finally, actually, get something done. One man said, "I can eat or I can fast, but my complaint is that I can only seem to do this physically." After many years involved with a certain interest and its related efforts, a man reflected, If I could continually do just 1/10 of what I know I should be doing, my days of complaint would surely be behind me. Why is it that even in this specialized area, what a person knows always outstrips his ability to act thereon? He deeply pondered, and just then the phone rang. And as he moved to answer, it told his reflection to wait there, that he'd be right back to continue the conversation. There was once a man who went off hunting minnows, later switching to sharks, then to whales. Then, as his ability to see underwater improved, ultimately changed his activity to floating. The reason you never see mystical fashion shows is because of obscenity laws. One man wrote symphonies, the heart of which were no problem. It was the beginnings and conclusions that threw him. So finally he just gave up the struggle and presented works that consisted only of a metal, letting the listeners fill in their own intros and endings. After this man read what I just wrote about him, he was so taken thereby that he wanted to use this approach regarding his mind. One man pondered, "There is a tip to my tongue, an end to my fingers, a cap to my knees, but where, oh where, is the limit to my thinking?" Less than a complete comprehension of the human anatomy can be, as I noted, the best course of action for most. And this includes calling the brain the mind, and that fog out there, you. No matter where he looked, this one man was always there. Know what he did? He quit looking. No one has to be conscious but a mystic, and him only because he wants to. In old mystic tales, a master would strike a seeker, causing the latter's enlightenment. But in more up-to-date times, a mystic must punt his own mind through the goalposts of thought just for he himself to stay in the game. 'Tis easy to say that the further I travel, the better it gets, before you've traveled far enough to say such a thing. But no matter, talk is talk and travel is still travel. One man thought, is it possible to plow the field so long that a crop never arrives? But he failed to take this far enough. For as long as you're plowing the fields, the crop can't come in. Simple laws of agriculture. One man spent a lifetime in numerous mystical schools. He would stay in one only until he could understand what they were talking about, at which time he'd leave and go on to a new one whose ideas were beyond him. There are no credit reporting agencies and organizations regarding mystics. Hey, let me ask you a question. You got change for a quarter? Where the hell did you get a quarter? Now there's the question. The neat thing about getting on this train, then getting off, then finding out you can get back on, is the further evidence that you either get it or you don't. Simple possibilities for simple creatures. The trick is to constantly be aware of what is happening to and in you, rather than thinking about what has and might. The trick, a consummate trick. A mystic once said that the greatest of all teachings is that in all things there is nothing real, but he neglected to note that one must discover for themselves what it is that constitutes these all things for it to be of use. A mystic once said that the greatest of all cautions is that a man can look at himself too much. And he took not the occasion to further note that this may be done non-physically. And may I take the occasion to note the connection between what the two said. One man bought an alarm clock, which he soon started setting to go off every hour, then every half hour, then every 15 minutes, then every 5, then every other second, except that the problem was remembering to continually reset it. He finally strapped it to his head, then swallowed it. And yet the original so-called problem persisted. He asked that if you have any solution, please contact him immediately, his time. One man purchased a device that played repetitious sounds to help him sleep at night. His wife thought he was foolish to waste money like that. The ability of sound to awaken does not preclude its ability to induce sleep, which in turn does not bar its being turned around to be used again for the initial purpose. Don't throw clocks at howling cats without realizing that you can also throw cats at clocks. To those working with this, domestic violence is in remaining far too close to yourself at home. Give yourself some room. Give yourself some space. Give yourself some time out away from you. A lot of time. A man asked a mystic, "Would you repeat for me again the statement that no one is conscious unless they, at the moment, are aware that they are?" And the mystic so obliged and said, "No one is conscious unless, at the moment, are aware that they are." "Thank you," said the man. "Just hearing you say that is always of such assurance and inspiration to me. Thank you." A man with passionate convictions is a notorious liar. Just listen to him closely. Unfounded preferences, which they all are, have a certain sound and will out. It's hard to teach the truth, harder still to talk about it, since teaching it reveals an ignorance thereof. A man said to a mystic, "I have waited 40 years without mentioning this, but now the time has come for me to ask, just what is the truth?" A question that was met with silence from the mystic, him figuring that the man could wait another 40 years for an answer. One man would often say to himself, not to be in such a hurry, which normally went unheeded in that the part of him to which it was addressed was usually too busy to hear him. Sad, huh? No. Then weird, huh? Not hardly. Informative? Could be. After reading a lengthy, complex, mystical tome, a suspicion stirred in a man that the secret might be in the footnotes, or even in the silence between the words. Anywhere you hear this son of not a morality play, anywhere you hear discussions going on regarding ethics and conduct, know that you are among children. A man asked a mystic. A man asked a mystic, are we to avoid the two extremes the mind finds in everything, or avoid what's in between the two? A man asked a mystic, is there a difference between walls and floors? One alone seems to confine space, yet they both take up space. A man asked a mystic, which occupies the most space, a question or an answer? And which of the two takes up the most time? A man asked a mystic, "When you look at me, do you see me coming or going? And is there any difference?" And the mystic raised a palm and said, "Only 4 questions per person." A man asked a mystic. One man discovered a cure for eyeglasses. Don't look. He also discovered a cure for hearing aids. Don't listen. Next on his agenda is confusion, for which he says he already suspects the cure. The mental indifference of a conscious man is not mere indifference, but is a kindly indifference. The indifference of a conscious man is not indifference to others, but to his own mind. On a Monday, or perhaps a Tuesday, a man mused, "Have not things come to a surprising place, whereat I find myself most intelligent when I'm not thinking?" A man said to a mystic, "I never thought I'd say this, but too late," noted the mystic. "Try again. But next time, start sooner." Men are like bats. They do not see, no, yet still they fly. When too close to the waves, one stays addicted to the beach. One mystic wrote himself a letter saying, "I do not understand everything you say," to which he replied, "Neither do I. But it makes no difference as long as I know what I'm talking about. It is not up to ideas to understand me, or me to understand ideas. What is proper and possible is to discover the schematics of the game, and then only use the beach for fun." Whenever he'd start to compose a letter, a man would think, "It's hard to know where to begin, but it's also difficult to decide where to end." And after several thousand such experiences, the man eventually just chucked all correspondence and only visited the beach for fun. One of the ideas that are expressed very commonly amongst ordinary people, particularly in the guise, under the auspices of religion, is that men have eyes and do not see, and that men have ears and do not hear, which lends itself perfectly for whatever it is that you are selling that succeeds that. But it is taken to be of extraordinary importance, potentially, when it gets into non-physical realms, such as religious, and it, as always, is a watered-down reflection of a reality and an original basis for this that came from someone more conscious. But to say that men have eyes and do not see, that men have ears and yet do not hear, and then you take off and you wave the Quran, or you wave Buddhist literature, or you wave whatever the idea or theory that you're hawking. And no one can, if they're going to play along, if they show up wherever it is to listen to such a hectoring, such a lecture, then there's nowhere to go with it other than just go ahead and be entertained, which is all it is anyway, regardless of what they surmise and pretend it to be. Because if you do not understand then or agree with whatever the lecturer is saying, then he can remind you, well, men have ears, but that does not mean necessarily they hear, which is, he's got you covered. If you don't agree with me, it just shows that you are spiritually or mentally deficient in your ability to hear. Would you be surprised to know that whoever said that originally said the opposite? The basis of it, which makes absolutely no sense to anyone with normal hearing or sight, is that a more conscious man, the so-called awakened or enlightened man, doesn't see and doesn't hear. Well, I told you it didn't make any sense. Hint, hint. Well, should I drag this out? Well, on the surface, it's absolutely insane. Or you assume, well, if someone said that, and it's assumed that they understood something, then they obviously meant it metaphorically. What if I said no? Of course, all that's required is that you expand or shift your conception, your definition of what is hearing and seeing. An additional one does not deny the ordinary visual sight, audible hearing. But if you hadn't already jumped there yourself, could I ask you to consider for a second an internal hearing and an internal vision? Nothing metaphysical. The symbols by which the brain works, passing itself off, I should note, in some jurisdictions as a mind. The pictures and the sounds are the symbols by which the brain breathes and circulates the blood. That should not be hard for even a civilian to hear such a thing and go, well, that's true. Everybody say, well, that's true. My question was, or what do you think the mind would answer if I then asked, which of the two would you say is of greater importance to men? Which of the two is the greater source of orientation? That which men visually see outside themselves. That means outside yourself. Well, I got to admit, it's that, and it's a very little known Lithuanian obscene gesture, but the only reason I bring it up is so that any Lithuanians won't think that I intended that. Yeah, I didn't intend that. Okay. If I ask which is of the greater importance, which is of more consistent use by men, their external vision, their orientation visually to the external world, and their hearing, or what I'm pointing to is just specifically that which goes on inside of each man's head. It is a non-ending series of sounds and pictures. We just don't normally talk about looking, but that is what is going on. You are seeing pictures and you're hearing sounds inside your mind. So if I presented the question and everyone understood what I was pointing to, and I said, which do you think is of greater use? Which one is in greater use? Doesn't matter how I do it, it's all going to come out the same, but I could say, which do men make greater use of which sort should men make greater use of which type is the greatest benefit derived? You catch the drift. What would the mind tend to say? That is, what would ordinary people tend to say? would anyone really disagree that most people, at first hearing, given enough time to think about it, but would they not say, well, it must be external vision and hearing? Because without it, you certainly couldn't orient yourself in life. Mere physical existence would be a deadly, potentially deadly game. If you couldn't hear, you wouldn't know when somebody blew a horn when you're crossing the street. If you couldn't see, you might pick up rat poison and drink it if you couldn't see the label warning you. I would suggest that people would ordinarily believe, to answer my question, they would ordinarily respond and say, well, it must be, not to necessarily discount the internal, but it must be ordinary visual sight, ordinary audio hearing of this external, not just Lithuanian, but this external sort. Well, I don't know, it's just coincidental how it fits because Lithuanians are known to be such extroverts and it just happen to kind of verbally fit in. I don't know of any significance to that, other than the fact that they are indoors so much year-round that it makes them extroverts. That is, however, just a rumor. But, of course, that's all this show is based on. Unfounded, unsubstantiated rumor. Anytime any of the rumors I pass along appear to be substantiated, if you notice, I drop them immediately. You never hear them again. No, sir. Ordinary people, in believing, and I still suggest that that would be the common answer to me saying which of the two, if you can picture the ability to see and the ability to hear as being a phenomenon constantly taking place inside your mind, and obviously the ability to see and the ability to hear being part of the sensory orientation by which men live in this physical world. And I said, which of the two, if you had to pick one of those two groups, which would be of more importance? That people would say the physical world for the very kinds of reasons I pointed out. It would appear to be so. That you are physically running a continuing risk of great bodily harm, if not death, could you not orient yourself? If somebody's spent the time to, the guess has always been for years, or this statistic is something like, whoever did it, that men orient themselves 90% of the time by sight. That is what has made man what he is. That and a charge card, of course. And, of course, migrating from Lithuania. Or to Lithuania. I always get them confused. But it works out all right in my kind of world, because if you're in Lithuania and things are not going the way you prefer, immigrate. And if you're not there and things are not going, then immigrate to there. So, it's all fairly simple when you live in that area of the North Sea. Now let's see. Oh. People would tend to say, I still suggest, that external sight and hearing would be of greater importance because someone could in fact be mentally, physically, brain damaged and could still live, could still possibly ambulate through life, get around. That what goes on in here, as important as it could be under certain conditions, under obviously specified conditions of people involved with the sciences and technology and blah, 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 but that everyone has got to, from day to day, moment by moment, orient themselves in life. And so that you must have that kind of sensory input, that ability to take it in and to analyze it. And the two primary ones being sight and hearing. Everything else on the scale surely would be of decreasing value, just relatively speaking. That's what an ordinary person would say, and there would be no really saying otherwise to them. A man who has made any sort of discovery about the true nature of the mind, and thus has an extraordinary perception, a non-standard perception at least in the beginning, of what life is about and man's position therein, has made a discovery unknown to everyone, save the few. And that is, you are not individually oriented in life. A man, regardless of what the mind says, and the mind in its ordinary state will deny this forever, cannot see it ad infinitum, cannot realize that man individually is no more orienting himself through life than is a fish in the depths of the ocean. You can see a film of a fish, or you can look down and see a fish, and a fish is always moving, except a coffee break. But there it is, a fish is always moving, and you see a fish going places. And if you're watching a National Geographic, the voiceover will even give details to fit into the editing of the film. It'll say, well, here is such and such reef fish in such and such area, and it shows how acclimated, how naturally he will look into certain crevices wherein is one of his favorite kinds of plankton, and it shows a fish darting here and darting there. And so you'd say, well, even though a fish does not have consciousness like humans, thank God. I said that on behalf of the fish lobby. Well, on behalf of some of my friends who happen to be fish. Plus, there's always a chance they'll adopt me if I and share their insights. At any rate, you look, and there would appear to be absolutely no question of the fact that a fish without consciousness is just the natural instincts of fish. That the fish is moving, and the fish is up to something. The fish is orienting himself. It shows that, so there's no speculation. The voiceover says, there goes one of the kinds of shrimp or plankton that is this particular fish's prime food. And there goes the fish, sure enough, it goes by, and this fish goes blah, 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 and goes right after it and snaps it and eats it. And you say, well, the fish, disregarding the question of consciousness and et cetera, it's just genetically built in. It's part of its instincts to pursue that. It's proper food, nothing strange. But you would say that still, disregarding the question of consciousness, that fish was orienting itself and making some sort of purposeful individual move. I mean, you can't say otherwise. It individually chased that piece of plankton or that other smaller fish for one purpose, to eat it. And you can see it, the other fish tried to get away, or the little shrimp, and it went around, they went through all this, and you can say, well, there it is. It was orienting itself, and it was moving in a manner purposeful to a fish, in a manner meaningful, necessary to a fish, for if the fish does not live in such a way, if it does not exhibit that kind of behavior, it will die. A fish can't just sit there and go, well, somebody bring me something to eat. It has to go after it. How? In what way can that ever be explained away? I mean, no, I can't even see anybody ever trying. But you understand, we're talking about the mind and not fish. But back to the fish for a second. Can you see? I am not attempting by any means to offer a commentary on oceanography or wave theory, even though it doesn't. Anyway, I couldn't resist. Plus, you hardly ever get complaints written in by mathematicians or physicists or chemists. Look, all the complaints come from a particular, well, I don't talk about it. Can anyone see, I just, as always, made that up on the spot, the example, but it is a decent one. But can you see this, and this cannot be proven, I'm not even sure that I could show it to an ordinary person. All I could do is they would probably, an ordinary mind, I could probably get them to agree that this may have some effect. But can you see this? You have to be able to think beyond the ordinary limits. Can you see that looking at a fish absolutely chasing a prey, whatever. But you see a fish moving. The body's moving. The fish is, you say the fish is doing it, because if a fish is dead, it just it doesn't move. There it is. It's moving. It's going after something. But even if we didn't know what it was going after, it's moving. And you look at it and say, well, the fish is moving. The fish is swimming. The fish is taking some action in life. That fish is swimming. And I say, well, that fish is not really swimming. The water is moving. Again, if you follow this for a second, and then you need to squish it immediately into your head, like a hungover fry cook would do at IHOP on a Monday morning to a pancake. I might get an ordinary person if I explain it just a bit more, and I said, well, now wait a minute. The fish appears to be swimming. They go, certainly. And I go, but also what you don't see, you're looking at the fish, and plus it's hard unless you get up to the waves on top, to the actual surf itself. Just filmed underwater, you don't really get a sensation unless there's something there moving, like plant life or something. And then, that there's something moving. You cannot see the ocean moving. We're down underwater. Considerable depth. We're down underwater and you cannot see the surface. You cannot really, through a camera just down there, you can't see the water move. But I would say to an ordinary person, you know that the water does not stop. The water is always moving to some degree, whatever the velocity is. But it is moving. The oceans are not still. And a person will go, yeah, I guess that's, yeah. And I say, all right, no matter if that fish appears to be swimming, would you grant me this? That at least the movements of the ocean are in part responsible for that fish's movement. And if they wouldn't go that far, I could say, all right, the fish, let's start off, the fish is swimming. We see that. And they go, yeah, I told you that. And I go, okay. But regardless of it swimming, it is not swimming in a static environment. The oceans are moving. Compare the size of the oceans of this planet to that fish that's 3 inches long. Now, you know that the movements of the ocean are having some effect on the fish swimming. And they would go, oh, yeah, you're right. That is at best. Can you see, though, that the fish is existence, its movements, everything about it is dependent absolutely on the ocean? That does not you cannot take that verbally any further, because the mind simply denies it. It simply points at what it observes visually through its own eyesight, that the fish itself is moving. And I grant you, the oceans are moving. But you cannot say that the ocean, the movement of the water, of its environment, is totally responsible for it moving, because I see it moving. Men hear their mind thinking. And yet I ask them, what are you going to say next? Blank. It is not dissimilar that if a fish did have consciousness, and there it is just swimming, going along and right out, just really busy. And if I could suddenly stop that fish and say, what are you up to? And it could suddenly be conscious, it'd go blank. Of course, that's one of the benefits of being non-conscious, is people don't ask you stupid-ass questions like that. The oceans, of course, I'm still speaking allegorically. By now we should say life. But I want you to see that there is an absolute connection between the immediate physical environment in which one lives, in this case a fish, and the waters, the oceans, that there is an absolute connection between that and a man's mind in his body, and his body in life, and his mind believes that it's doing one thing that it is not doing. And it cannot be told that. It cannot observe it unless it can get away from itself. But it is a simple fact. I can't go much further. I'm not going to waste time. You either see that regardless of conditional statements, regardless of partial observations one can make, the oceans are responsible for the fish's movement. The fish, by all observation, without any doubt, it's not a trick of the eye, the fish is moving. And the fish's movement, as everyone knows, is to some purpose. It is not doing the hula hula. It's not trying to shake breadcrumbs out of its lap. It is moving. Its body is in motion to propel it. But I am saying, you either get a glimpse of this or you do not. That is true, but that means nothing. It is the oceans that are moving that fish. Now that is literally true, and that is allegorically true. If the oceans stop, the oceans are moving the fish. The fish certainly appears to be swimming, but to say that the fish is responsible for its movement is to be only know what you could learn from first grade arithmetic, and then to hear theories of trigonometry described and to deny them. It is to see the local as being the final statement of the universal. It is to mistake a phenomenon for the cause of it. It is to mistake, as is one of the more popular versions, it is to mistake a cause for the symptom, which is why ordinary minds always say, well, here we're trying to cure crime, we're trying to cure fish swimming illegally or too fast. But what we try to do is put up these little fish speed limit signs. Or we try to punish little fish for swimming too fast, but that will never do, because all we're doing is treating symptoms. We've got to get to the cause of what causes these little fish to try and go against the norm. They have mistaken the cause for the symptom, just in case you thought you misheard it. In other words, they can't see the cause. They go where the fish are swimming. They must be held responsible. Yeah, I know. As long as you're living in a civilized aquatic world, fish must be held responsible. A fish cannot say, well, I ended up hanging around that unsavory area where they had little fish narcotics for sale. But hey, I didn't mean to swim there. I was trying to swim toward church. And the movements of the ocean just took me over there. I was helpless. The carp on the bench may look at him and say, well, I try to be compassionate. And I've heard stories similar to that, but I must tell you, eventually, we're all held responsible for our actions, and you must be responsible also. And the little fish goes, oh, because that's what little fish minds and human minds do. Even if they don't like it, even if when it happens to you, you look otherwise. The oceans are responsible for a fish's movement, not the fish. Do you think that it is truly an individual man's senses, sight, hearing, and everything else? But we can skip some of that now if you can hear me. In the same way, I'm comparing now a man here on this planet, an everyday man, to a little fish in the oceans. Do you still believe, without any doubt, that you are responsible, that you are being motivated through your own effort, that you are operating in a purposeful manner, even though we stop and you go, yes, I am. You saw me walking out to my car just then, striding right out. Yes, I saw you. You know why? Why? I am on the way to the store because I am out of milk and I am hungry. So I am going. Nobody made me go to the store. I could stay here and I won't die. I could do without milk. I got some other food. I wanted milk. I feel the need for calcium. I need the feel of a closer spiritual connection with my bovinian brothers. What can you say to that? Nothing. There's nothing to say to the mind. But do you, those of you who hear me, who are here and can hear it, do you really think, do you still believe, without any condition, that individual men are purposefully motivating themselves and moving through life, even though in every individual anecdotal example you can come up with, the answer is yes, just like I did. Man's striding down the street, all in perhaps, I don't know, a huff or a quandary. It's obviously not a Studebaker because they don't. But there he goes striding along, and you suddenly jump out and you stop him, and you tell him what I've been trying to tell you for the last 40 minutes. And he goes, "Are you crazy?" Well, skip all that. And you say, "What are you up to?" I mean, you look like you were just almost in another world. You were down there glassy-eyed and oblivious to your surroundings, but going along at such a clip there. The man go, "I'm glad you asked me." And he'll have a story, will he not? Yes, he will. He will have a story. The idea of truth and reality and lies has nothing to do with it. He has to have a story. He will be on his way somewhere. He'll be on his way somewhere if it was just to escape the thorns of Awi. He was on his way to find something to do, if nothing else. As long as a man will accept that, he is an ordinary man. He is doing as he should, but he will understand nothing. He will never understand the nature of the mind. External sight and hearing is of no more importance to whether or not you could live out your days, whether you orient yourself in life. You individually, through all of the natural powers, are no more responsible, are no more motivating yourself than is that fish in the water, which the ordinary mind says, "Well, it is. I know, we've been through that." But you're not. It's not, and an ordinary man is not. A fish, of course, never thinks that it is. And if a man did not have a brain as such as he has, if a man did not have a mind, if a man did not have usable symbols that he could see and hear in his mind, the question would never cross his mind. Which to someone who does have the potential to ever see should be a kind of sticking a finger in a small socket. Just to begin to see that no, it doesn't matter. Well, no, men do not do that, but it has no effect anyway. It doesn't matter. The only way it would matter to a fish to believe that it actually was responsible for its motivations and its actions would be that if it thought it was. That is not merely a piece of non-sequential humor, because now let's take this. The mind is of no significance to a man unless he thinks it is. But then you're left with this. You are not even up to the ordinary standards, much less well, you're just not an ordinary human unless you think that. You're right. For a man not to believe that his mind is of some significance would be an absolute sign of abnormality. We all know that. It would be, a man would be outside the general acceptable domain of a human being. He would be socially unfit, period. It would denote actual brain damage. It would be damage in the nervous system somewhere, and it reached the brain. The mind is of extreme significance to a man as long as he thinks it is. And if he's ordinary, he will think it is forever. Notice this, you can think that forever, which all ordinary people do, and when you die, you know not one more thing about the operations of the mind than you did when you were born. But, if you want to look at it this way, whew, well, thank God I lived 80 years and didn't have to think about it. Well, maybe they wouldn't want to put it that way. Well, I lived 80 years and didn't have to worry about it. Okay. Back to the opening. It was said originally, and not written down, not remembered by ordinary people, that contrary to the one about men have eyes, allegorically, the common statement, men have eyes but do not see, men have ears but do not hear, referring to the truth and reality, of course. Whereas the first person who ever said that could see, could hear, and was more conscious. And what he said was A man who is liberated into other areas of the brain does not see and he does not hear. And we all know what it is he's talking about, right? That there's a certain thing he does not see and a certain thing he does not hear. And as a man said tonight in a news item, that it has come to a surprising place, has it not? That at my most intelligent, it seems to be wherein you have to go back and re-roll the tape in case you forgot it, because I'm not going to finish it.